welcome to everybody who has joined us online. This is the first of a series of panel discussions on the future of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. And a special welcome to all those viewers, and there now seem to be several hundred of you, which is great, who are watching this broadcast live on BRT and Kanal T. This evening, and over the next few discussions, we will be discussing the questions related to: what does the future of Cyprus look like? Two states, bizonal communal federation, or confederation? Please join us and join our debate by posting your questions in our Q&A section, which is just looks like two speech bubbles at the bottom of your screen. While we may not get through all the questions this evening, we will certainly try and cover them over the series of discussions we'll be having over the next couple of months. Feel free to post your questions during this discussion. A reminder that the second and third of these series of events are scheduled for February and March 24th, again at 7 p.m. UK time. Now I'd like to read a message from the Parliamentary Undersecretary of State, the Minister for European Neighbourhood and Americas, Wendy Morton. As you will be aware, the UK continues to support comprehensive, just and lasting settlement of the Cyprus issue based on the internationally accepted model of a bizonal, bicommunal federation as set out in relevant Security Council resolutions. The event you are planning and the topics covered come at a time of increased focus on the UN process on a Cyprus settlement, which the UK continues to support. So just to reiterate what the UK government's position is, it is based on an increased focus on the UK process on a Cyprus settlement. And now we have a video message that has been sent to us from Ersin Tatar, the president, the new president, I hasten to add, of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, that we would now like to play for you.
In 1960, which was a very important date in the history of Cyprus, as you all know, one of the two co-founding peoples of the Republic of Cyprus was obviously Turkish Cypriots. Therefore, when we start from that date, we were as equal as Greek Cypriots. Unfortunately, in 1964, after the Turkish Cypriots were kicked out by the EOKA movement and Makarios forces, the Republic of Cyprus continued to be recognized as the only recognized state which was obviously occupied by the Greek Cypriots. Since then, this is very important, Turkish Cypriots have been running their own state. So therefore, this is a very important point that should be respected, that the Turkish Cypriots since then have been running their own affairs within their own state apparatus. First of all, it was after 1963, Turkish Cypriot administration. Then it became Turkish Cyprus Autonomous State. Then it became Turkish Federated State of Cyprus after 1983, when Rauf Denktaş, our founding president, announced the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Since 1983, our state has been Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Therefore, when we look at the history of Cyprus, after 1960, we have been separated, and Turkish Cypriots have been running their own state, and now the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus since 1983. Therefore, we say to the international community that we deserve our own state to be recognized, because throughout the history, we have, in effect, enjoyed our own sovereignty. Therefore, my policy now, as the new elected president of the Turkish Cypriots, is that we should have two equal sovereign states on the island, because we have been sovereign anyway. Whereas the Greek Cypriots, and unfortunately in the United Nations and the European Union to date, have been recognizing the Republic of Cyprus as the only state in Cyprus. And a lot of attempts, as you know, lately, including the Annan Plan and the talks at Crans-Montana to establish a federated structure which would last on a fair and equitable basis to be sustainable, has been exhausted, because despite Turkish Cypriot good intentions, we have not had the response that we should have got from our Greek neighbors. Therefore, all those attempts have been exhausted, have been fruitless. Therefore, our new policy, and we are running this policy 100% in accordance with the Turkish government, we are saying that the new talks should be based on sovereign equality. We should have two equal and sovereign states in Cyprus. In the north, Turkish Cypriot state; in the south, Greek Cypriot state. And we also stress the fact that if we are going to have a lasting solution, it should not be on the basis of the Republic of Cyprus. We should have two new states, the one in the north and the one in the south, and they should recognize each other. Unless these two states in Cyprus recognize each other and respect what they have been doing for the last so many years, then you cannot have it lasting, and you cannot have it on a sustainable basis. Therefore, we demand our sovereignty, we demand our equality, and we, on every occasion, we communicate this aspiration, our natural right, to the international community, that we are one of the two peoples on the island, and we deserve to be as sovereign as the Greek Cypriots, and therefore, after all these years, we deserve to have our own state to be recognized. We believe that if we have a fair solution on the island based on what I have been saying, two equal sovereign states, then we will have peace and security in the whole Eastern Mediterranean, in this region, because since the high carbon energy reserves has been on the agenda, we have had a lot of, as you know, headaches, because Turkey is involved in the Eastern Mediterranean exploration rights with Greece and the Greek Cyprus, their own attempts, and therefore a lot of tension in the area. Therefore, if we have a solution based on what I've been saying, which is the realistic expectation, because whatever the international committee tries to communicate to us, the fact is that we have two states on the island anyway. And since Turkish Cypriots have been running their own affairs within their own state since 1963, which is more than half a century, and we have a lot of documentation to prove our legitimacy. One of them is in 1977 in England, Lord Denning, he ruled that involved the Dome Hotel. Lord Denning's statement was that whether we recognize or not, we have to respect and we have to recognize that there are two autonomous administrations in Cyprus. One is in the north, belonging to Turkish Cypriots. The other one is in the south, belonging to the Greek Cypriots. This is the reality of Cyprus, which was recognized in a British court way back in 1977. Former Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Jack Straw, when he said that after the Greek Cypriots were admitted into Europe unfairly, because according to the Cyprus constitution, unless Greece and Turkey also belongs to that big organization, Europe, Greek Cypriots on their own should not have been admitted into Europe. After that, obviously Greek Cypriots had another advantage after the 1964 United Nations resolutions that recognized the Republic of Cyprus as the government of the whole of Cyprus. Therefore, their tendency to come into an agreement with the Turkish Cypriots on a fair basis was even less. Therefore, Jack Straw said the only way to achieve a fair and a lasting settlement in Cyprus would be through recognizing the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Unless you do that, there would not be a tendency from the Greek Cypriots to recognize and to respect the Turkish Cypriots, because that would mean that they would lose some of their potential control over the whole of Cyprus. Therefore, my policy, and this is supported fully by the Turkish government, after all these opportunities have been exhausted, and after all the new developments in the Eastern Mediterranean, to have a lasting peace on a fair and sustainable basis, this should be based on two equal sovereign states. They should obviously prevail for the good and prosperity of the island, for economic reasons, for reasons of the hydrocarbon energy exploration rights. In a nutshell, this is what I would say. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. So now what we've had is sort of two positions effectively set out. The UK government position, which is supporting the UN process, and the new Turkish Cypriot president's approach following his election, which is now pushing for really a two-state solution. So now we've had these arguments framed, I'd like to introduce everybody to our esteemed panelists this evening. First, we have Professor Hüseyin Işıksal. Professor Işıksal has been special advisor to the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus President on international relations and diplomacy. He's a member of the negotiation team and the president of the International Relations Committee. Lee Scott, who was a former colleague of mine in Parliament and was a member of Parliament between 2005 and 2015 for Ilford North, served as Parliamentary Private Secretary, first to Philip Hammond and then to Chris Grayling. He chaired the Regulation Reform Select Committee and served on the Speaker's Chairman's panel. He was also, under David Cameron, the Prime Minister's Special Needs Children's Czar between 2009 and 2010. Andrew Rosindell is currently the MP, Member of Parliament for Romford in Essex, and has been so since 2001. So it's your 10th anniversary, 20th anniversary, I think, Andrew. So congratulations on that. Andrew grew up in Romford, is a local boy and man, bred, and served his community, I really think, his entire life. He was a councillor first, prior to his election to Parliament 20 years ago. And finally, we have Michael Stephen, the former Conservative MP and Harkness Fellow in International Law at Harvard, my alma mater, and Stanford. He's been an advisor to President Denktaş between 1986 and 2005, and author of The Cyprus Question. So thank you all for joining us. And Michael, I'd like to start off with you, if I can. As just mentioned, you were an advisor to the former Turkish Cypriot President, Rauf Denktaş, for almost 20 years, and wrote your book, The Cyprus Question. Give us, if you can, a bit of context and history on the Cyprus problem for our listeners, and lead us up to where we are now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Brooks. When I started researching my book, I thought, as most English people did, that Turkey was the aggressor and that the Greek Cypriots were the injured party. But I soon realized that the exact opposite was the case. In the British newspaper archives, I found many reports which had been forgotten, including this one, which I'm going to read, from 1963. We went tonight into the Turkish Cypriot quarter of Nicosia, in which 200 to 300 people had been slaughtered in the last 5 days. We were the first Western reporters there, and we have seen sights too frightful to be described in print. Horror so extreme that the people seemed stunned beyond tears. This was the deliberate, organized murder of men, women, and children. It was an attempted genocide, and there were further attempts in 1967 and 1974. These tragedies were born out of a deep religious and racial hatred of people just because they were Turkish, which had been inculcated into many Greek Cypriot people over many years not least by the Greek Orthodox Church. I fear that this has not entirely gone away, and until ever it does, it is futile to try to construct a federation or even a confederation. The Turkish Cypriots are fortunate that the Greek Cypriots rejected the Annan plan. I was sure at the time, and so was President Denktaş, that the Greek Cypriots would have used their numerical and financial superiority and their undoubted legal and political skills to manipulate the institutions to their advantage and to the detriment of the Turkish Cypriots, as indeed they did from 1960 to 1963. They would by now have gained control of the whole island. That was a narrow escape, and the Turkish Cypriots should not walk into that trap again. The Greek Cypriots are still working towards the total control of the island, and I'm told that they even tried to prevent this webinar from happening. Now, whilst the perpetrators of genocide in the Second World War have been made to pay for their crimes, the leaders of the Greeks and Greek Cypriots have never to this day had to account for their behavior to any court, nor even at the bar of public opinion. There's not even been an apology, just denials and attempts to shift the blame. Why were these Greek Cypriots never prosecuted? It is because the Americans and the British did not consider it in their own interests to encourage any action against them. Instead, the Greek Cypriots were treated as if they were the lawful government of all Cyprus, which they are not and never have been. For centuries, the island has been a strategic asset for important military powers, and those powers have never cared much about the wishes or needs of the people who live on the island, and so it is today. The rules of public international law say that the TRNC is entitled to recognition, but it has been withheld by everyone except Turkey because the Americans, the British, and latterly the EU and the Russians, and of course Greece and the Greek Cypriots, do not want it, and they have the power to prevent almost everyone else from granting recognition. As to the Americans and the British, they effectively share a military base and an electronic listening station in Cyprus. But unfortunately for the Turkish Cypriots, these are in the Greek Cypriot part. They don't want any friction with the Greek Cypriots, so why would they care about the legal rights or even the human rights of the Turkish Cypriots if it would annoy the Greek Cypriots? Another factor for decision makers in London and Washington is the political influence of the Greek diaspora, which the Greek Cypriots have used far more effectively than the Turkish Cypriots have used the Turkish diaspora. As to the European Union, they have taken Greece and the Greek Cypriots in as members, and they will always take the side of a member against a non-member, particularly since members still have some veto powers. They have not admitted Turkey, and I don't think they ever will. They have cynically led Turkey to believe for 50 years that they might get in, but this has been done simply so that they could exert a degree of control over Turkey. However, I think that this policy is coming seriously unstuck as it's driving Turkey towards the Russians and the Chinese and away from the West. As to the Russians, the Greek Cypriots have been cultivating them since Makarios's time, and they could always rely on Russian support at the UN. Even Turkey has not used its political assets to obtain recognition for the TRNC, though I hear that this may be changing. Why would Turkey want the TRNC to be an independent actor on the world stage if it can keep Northern Cyprus in the state of near total dependence on Ankara, into which the Turkish Cypriots have been forced by international isolation? Why would Turkey want to risk being told by a recognized government of the TRNC to remove its troops from Cyprus, which it sees as essential to its own security? We are all aware that some anti-Turkish sentiment exists in the TRNC, and of course it would be actively promoted from the south and from some embassies if the TRNC gained recognition. Finally, what do I think of the UN? Well, in the darkest days, the UN troops never had the will nor the ability to protect the Turkish Cypriots from atrocities, and nor do they today. Long ago, I advised President Denktash to send them away and stop the charade of the UN talks, as they were going nowhere. And the talks simply gave the Americans and the British an excuse to say that they are supportive, as they still say today, but to maintain the embargo until an overall settlement had been achieved. President Denktash agreed with me, but said that Ankara would not let him stop the talks. The talks are also preventing Denktash himself from devoting his time and energy to improving matters within the TRNC. I think the time has now come for the international community to take Cyprus off its agenda and allow the Turkish and Greek Cypriots to deal with each other as equals and with mutual recognition, if they so wish. Will the great powers allow that? Of course not. Do I think the 5+ UN talks will achieve anything? No, unless there has been a change of attitude on the part of those powers. I don't think a federation or even a confederation would work, because the differences are too deep for the foreseeable future. There would be nothing but trouble. In my view, the peoples of Cyprus will remain for the foreseeable future as pawns in the great game of geopolitics, where legal rules are respected only if they serve the interests of the powerful. We live in an imperfect world, but fortunately for the Turkish Cypriots, their country is a safe and pleasant place to live.
Thank you, Michael, for that tour de force on the history of Northern Cyprus and the geopolitics around really what the Northern Cyprus and Cyprus as a whole is facing today. I think I'd like to maybe begin with Professor Işıksal. And I guess the first question that I'd like to ask is, what do you see as the future of Cyprus? Is it going to be a two-state solution? Is it going to be a bizonal, bicommunal federation, or a confederation? And you can take as much time as you'd like, given this is your sort of opening pitch.
Thank you, Brooks. You are asking such a good questions, and it's not easy to answer, of course, with few sentences. But let me first of all send my warm greetings from the Presidential Palace of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus in Nicosia. I would like to thank the Council of Turkish Cypriot Association, British Turkish Cypriot Association, and Circle Foundation for organizing such a wonderful event and inviting me. As you mentioned, the program is broadcasting live in Turkish national channel in North Cyprus, BRT, and also popular private channel, Kanal T. And also TRT will also make some summaries, I think, Turkish national channel. And I would like to greet, of course, my relatives and friends in England, because I myself was a Chevening scholar. I got the opportunity to study in England at Warwick, do my master's and PhD with the scholarship from the British Council. So first of all, I'm coming from an academic background. I am very alien to diplomatic circles. So therefore, let me apologize firsthand for my unorthodox standing, and I will be very frank and outspoken in my presentation. So let me start with my preliminary observation, which is the current status quo is unacceptable, arguably, both for the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. In the further stages, if I have time, I will explain in detail why it's also not good for the Greek Cypriots, because many people will know that it's not good for the Turkish Cypriots, but I argue that it's also the status quo is not good for the Greek Cypriots too. So the second observation is we are seeing the rising significance of the negative peace all around the world. It used as in a negative manner, but now, especially when you look at the Cyprus, where nobody killed after '74, we really start to appreciate and understand the real value of negative peace, especially when we are looking to the Middle East, where thousands of people are losing their lives in daily basis. My other observation is hydrocarbon resources in the Eastern Mediterranean could lead to a conflict in already fragile and unstable region, and this fact further increase a solution in Cyprus. So I would like to start with this. I don't know whether it's visible. It's a historic Turkish paper dated 3rd of June 1968. So 3rd of June 1968. And it says that Denktaş and Claridis, as the leaders of both countries, they landed to Beirut. And they are staying in the same hotel. And just below here, there's something very significant. It says that nobody knows how long the negotiations will continue. So from 1968 on, we have such a long negotiations that never come to an end. But there's a good side of this long negotiation. What's the good side is, now we all know what does not and will not work in Cyprus. As Einstein perfectly stated, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we see that the negotiation process is failed. We need to think outside of the box. We need to think about new alternatives. We have to come with new ideas. And even the Secretary General, in his reports, he used a new wording of this time must be different, which is very remarkable. So when we are looking from the Turkish Cypriot side, what we want? First of all, we want a solution, but we want a just and sustainable solution, not a short-lived ones as happened in 1960. So how are we going to achieve this? It should be based on sovereign equality of both sides, where one party directly or indirectly cannot impose its will, its authority, its sovereignty over the other. And we believe that once this achieved, then cooperative relations between two sides may afterwards develop. So we don't see our Greek neighbors as our enemies. We see them as our partners, and we got lots of opportunities that we can grasp together. But the realization of this vision naturally requires mutual respect, not only by words, but also in practice. And we believe that Turkish Cypriots, as the neglected community, one of the most neglected communities in the world, deserve much more respect. So what are the alternatives? As you mentioned, can Trnc could be recognized? Let me give you the answer very directly. It is. If there's a will, there's the way. But first, I would like to answer another question. Because even if British policies talk about, reunification of the island, and I would like to ask this question: was Cyprus ever united? Since the Ottoman rule that lasted 350 years, we got two different communities in the island. They subject to different rules. They were different people. Even marriages among them was prohibited. Then, 1960 agreement, again, completely different two peoples. Turkish Cypriots elected Turkish Cypriot vice president, Greek Cypriots elected Greek Cypriot president, 70-30 ratio, etc., etc. Then, after 1963 unfortunate events, where Greek Cypriots kicked out the Turkish Cypriots out of the republic by using violence and force, then what happened? Can we talk about supreme authority of Greek Cypriots over the Turkish Cypriots? No. The answer is again no, because as stated in the United Nations Secretary General reports, it says that Greek government, law enforcing authorities and officials are inaccessible to the areas inhabited entirely by the Turkish Cypriots. So from 1964 January on, still there were two de facto administrations in the island. So Turkish Cypriots first established General Committee in 1964. In 67, we established Provisional Turkish Cypriot Administration. In 74, we established Autonomous Turkish Cypriot Administration. In 1975, we established Turkish Cypriot Federal State. In 1983, we established Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. So all this shows that it's never united, and Turkish Cypriots never accepted the authority, will, or sovereignty of Greek Cypriots, even in their darkest days. So let's come to the more contemporary discussion. The most commonly accepted convention on the statehood, which is Montevideo Convention. It says that in order to be state, you should have 4 basic criteria: a defined and protected territory, a permanent population, effective government that has jurisdiction over territory, and the capacity to conduct external relations. I'm looking to the Trnc, objectively speaking. Yes, I am a side, but objectively speaking, Trnc fulfills all the 4 criteria of statehood. We have a well-defined and protected territory, we have permanent population, we have effective government with established state organs, and we have capacity to conduct international relations with other states effectively. Trnc at the moment have 27 representatives in more than 20 countries, including United States and England, as you know. So I'm continuing. What is more interesting to me is, in addition to these basic requirements of statehood, Trnc also have extras. What are the extras? We have democratically elected government, and we have respect for rule of law, which is absent in many countries in the world that are recognized. So this is, accordingly, brings a strong moral case, which even stronger legal arguments can develop. And in this respect, I would like to remind you that every critical decision Turkish Cypriot administration took, it approved by the referendum by the people. So it was never top to bottom decision. It's always approved by the people. And most importantly, today there are many states that are recognized, but we call them failed states. So although they are recognized, they cannot pay their wages, they cannot control their territories, they don't even have de facto control over their territories, which is once more demonstrated that Trnc is much more successful than most of its counterparts. So, although Trnc, having all these criteria, have its effective control, as you know that infamous United Nations Security Council Resolution 541 declared the withdrawal of this declaration and called other states to not recognize Trnc and only Republic of Cyprus. So here, the question that comes to my mind, like most of the people's minds, does the Security Council have this judicial capacity to decide about the recognition of a state or a validity or legality of a state? Do they have this capacity? The answer is no. So Security Council decision was a political one. So if it's a political one, then naturally it can be changed automatically. So I'm coming to the contemporary point. We all know who rejected the Annan Plan.
Professor Işıksal, can you wind up in the next minute though, because we have lots of questions and other speakers.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Okay. I would like to answer what is our position, what's our new position in the next question, if you want, Brooks.
Okay.
Okay. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you very much again for a very thorough briefing. I think it's incredibly appreciated. I think maybe quickly turn to Andrew. Andrew, what do you see as the future of Cyprus looking like? Is it effectively going to be, 2 states within one country, or a completely 2-state solution as currently being proposed by the new president?
Well, good evening, Brooks. Thank you very much for hosting this evening. I'm really pleased to be able to join you tonight. I have been interested in the Cyprus issue for many years now, having been to Cyprus on large numbers of occasions for different meetings with political parties, both in the Republic of Cyprus and in the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. And as Michael Stephen said at the start of his remarks, when I first went to Cyprus and first learned about the issues there, I assumed that there was one aggressor and there was one victim. But it's only over the years of meeting both members of both communities, of engaging with the politicians on both sides, and in making up my own mind, that I came to the view that actually it's a lot more complicated than we have been led to believe. And over the years, I have argued for different solutions to Cyprus, all of which are based on what has to be a consensus between both communities. There cannot be an imposed solution by the EU or the UN or anybody else. There has to be a consensus to resolve this issue. So I came up with all sorts of ideas about confederation of one sort or another. I even suggested that maybe Cyprus should return to a Commonwealth of Cyprus and have a neutral head of state, such as the Queen. The Queen used to be the head of state of Cyprus and have two equal communities within a Commonwealth, a federation. And actually, a lot of people in Northern Cyprus were very supportive of that suggestion. And I still think that's something that should not be ruled out. However, I think that as time has gone on, and I remember going to Cyprus in 2006, meeting some of my friends on the Greek side, and they said to me then that they were worried that unless things get resolved within a few years, that generations will come and go, and in the end, maybe there will never be a solution to this. And I rather felt that they were correct. And that was a long time ago. That was now like 15 years ago. And even now, I don't think we're any closer to any type of solution. So there is only two solutions. Either the communities, both communities come together and form some kind of federation, whereby I think you would have to have a neutral or revolving head of state, where effectively you have two communities totally autonomous within one nation state. I actually feel now that the chances of that happening are dwindling. I cannot see at this stage how that's likely to happen. I'd like it to happen because I'd like Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots to live together in harmony. But if that cannot be resolved after nearly 50 years now, 60 years really, of this issue continuing to be such a long way from being resolved, then there is, I'm afraid, I say to my Greek friends, there is unfortunately no other solution than Northern Cyprus being recognised. And I have warned them repeatedly over the years when I visited and had meetings with them, that unless they change their view and become reasonable and accept that Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots have to be treated as equal with any kind of solution, then in the end, inevitably, there will be two states. And I think we are now moving in that direction. So I haven't given up any hope that there could be a coming together of the two communities. But I personally am now erring to the view that it's probably past the time when that could have been achieved. And as time goes on, and as new generations come forward, it's very hard to bring it all back together again. What I do hope is if there are going to be two states, that we can work with both communities to facilitate harmonious, neighbourly approach, resolving some of the issues of land and property that have created such upset and division over the years. We clearly have to resolve some of those issues. But in the end, if there are two states, well, so what? There are two states on islands across the world. There are many examples of successful nation states that share an island together. So it is perfectly possible, and I think Britain has a role in this, particularly as Cyprus is a part of the Commonwealth. And I keep repeating to my Greek friends that Northern Cyprus really is just as much part of the Commonwealth as the Greek side. It's just that the Northern Cyprus side has no voice and no representation. That has to end. We cannot treat the Turkish people, the Cypriot Turkish people, differently and inferior to the Greek. There has to be equal sides coming together, and if that cannot be achieved, then yes, there will have to be. There is, in fact, only one other option, and that is the recognition of two equal states.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I'm going to actually throw the next question to Lee. Lee and I have had many discussions in the past of two-state or one-state solutions in a different part of the world when it comes to Israel and Palestine. I'm not looking for your views on that, but really you and I have discussed the challenges in a different part of the world. So I'm wondering what your views are, particularly given what you've heard this evening already, on whether there should be a two-state solution or effectively following more of the UN approach, which is sort of two nations within one country.
Brooks, firstly, thank you for hosting tonight. And can I start by saying that I think all of us would want to offer our condolences and sympathies to everyone throughout the entire world who has lost their lives with a milestone, sadly, in the United Kingdom today, of passing 100,000 people who've lost their lives to coronavirus. And I think the element of this actually starts to put some things into perspective. I agree with a lot that Andrew said, and I don't have Michael or Hüseyin's in-depth knowledge, but I first visited Cyprus, the whole of Cyprus, in 1979. And some of the questions that have been raised tonight, as Andrew quite rightly says, were being raised a very, very long while ago, 40 to 50 years ago. And nothing much has changed. I genuinely believe that the people who should be making the decisions are both the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. There shouldn't be, as Andrew quite rightly says, anything enforced on anybody. If anything's going to work, it's got to be the people backing it. However, in saying that, obviously, again, and Andrew, we've known each other a long while, so perhaps that's why I agree with you so much. But what Andrew said about in the ideal world of everyone living in harmony together, and that is one of the most important things. Peace is the most important thing. Prosperity, health is the most important thing for everyone on the island of Cyprus. But we may have gone past that stage where that is achievable in a one state. It may well be that it has to be two states. I would like to see every avenue still explored, but I think we are fast getting to the stage where, as I think you said, generations have now gone by. There's new generations and other generations coming where, if you like, the disagreements of the past may be a little too strong. However, I still would like to see some form of negotiation and see where it can go. But as Andrew said, it may be too.
Thank you for that. Okay, so everyone is sort of effectively set out their, where they stand on this. And we've had two very detailed analysis of how we've got to where we are today. I'd like to turn back to Michael then and ask him, what are the barriers then to recognizing a Turkish Cypriot state?
Well, as the professor said, and I said, there are no legal barriers. In fact, if you read the textbooks on recognition of states, you find that the TRNC does satisfy all the criteria. But as I said in my remarks, the reason that the TRNC has not been recognized is because the great powers don't want it, for the reasons that I indicated in the case of the British and the Americans, mainly to do with the military bases. If they were not there and the Greek Orthodox Church were not there, I think everyone would be living happily ever after in Cyprus. But that is not the reality of today.
So that's again sort of repeating where we are, but how do we effectively try and move the dial a bit with these great states? Or do you think that really the only solution is to keep pursuing a track, which is the UN track, and ending up with Professor Işıksal's analysis of the definition of madness is repeating the same thing again and again and hoping for a different solution?
Well, we heard in the statement from the Foreign Office Minister, the British government is saying the same as it was saying 50 years ago. So their policy hasn't changed. The only way that recognition is going to happen is if the interrelationship between the great powers changes. And here, of course, Turkey is very important. Does Turkey have something that the others want? Is Turkey in a position to play its cards rather more skillfully than it currently has on the international scene? Is somebody, Turkey or anybody else, going to be in a position to break the logjam, which is what it is, the entrenched positions of the Americans, the British, the Russians, and the European Union? And of course, you can take it for granted the entrenched positions of the Greeks and the Greek Cypriots as well. So can you break the great power logjam? If you can't, then the status quo will go on forever. And I sometimes get a little bit upset when people talk about a solution as if the solution must involve some kind of unification between the Greek and Turkish Cypriots. As the professor has said, there never has been any unification. So why are we trying to force these two peoples into a marriage that they don't want? And it's very obvious. They've tried very hard. And a lot of people have tried to help them. And it won't work. These two people are not made to be married. They need to live in separate houses, dealing with each other with mutual respect, and hopefully being helped rather than hindered by the rest of the world.
Right, thank you for that. To give Turkey some credit on this issue, they've got a lot of pressure points that they're facing today. So yeah. I think if Turkey is using its cards with the international community, so yeah. I think the question is how do we raise Northern Cyprus on their agenda so they can use their leverage? They've used their leverage to enormous effect with the Americans, with the Russians. They have chosen to date not to do that in Cyprus. Yeah. So I think you're right. They can use their leverage. They just haven't chosen to at this stage. So I'd like to go to Professor Işıksal. So again, what do you see as the barriers? And if you can keep it reasonably succinct, because in about 8 minutes, we need to turn it over to the wider public who have sent in over 50 questions so far. So if you can keep it to 2 or 3 minutes, that would be great.
Well, Brooks, you're asking me the mission impossible.
In 2 minutes, though.
Okay, let me try to put it like this. First of all, how the international community understand the so-called peace in Cyprus thus far is to listen to the Greek community and having empathy to their solution, and they did not have a good and sufficient analysis of a real understanding of peace, and they couldn't understand the international let's say structure and conjecture and which is demonstrated this perception is wrong. So we believe that the only solution, only sustainable solution in Cyprus is only sovereign equality of the two parties. And I would like to remind you that as the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, we are holding the key and we see ourselves as a shock observer. In a means that the Greek Cypriots actually could benefit from their recognition and relations with Turkey in tourism, in water, in electricity, in every single field that you can imagine. But we are holding the key as Turkish Cypriots, let's say the key of these relations. In order to exploit the hydrocarbon resources for the Greek Cypriots, they need to have settlement in Cyprus. And everybody knows that carrying the gas to Europe beyond Turkey is at least 7 times cheaper, more profitable than risking it to thousands of kilometers through the imaginary ISMET project. Plus, they will cut their military budget and add this money to their economy, which the Greek Cypriots spending huge amounts of money, on this expending. So let me finish with what shouldn't be. As British High Commissioner Stefan Lilly recently stated on his on the official account, he said that only through reunification will Cyprus be able to achieve the full potential as a hub prosperity and stability. First of all, there shouldn't be any straitjacket and prejudgment like Mr. Lilly did, because we will not go anywhere with such a straitjacket statements. Right. And I have many things to do about you are forcing, but let me finish this part like this. We should all know that any enforced peace in Cyprus will kill all the other pieces within the island. So, and nobody can risk it. None of the great powers, none of the regional powers can risk to endanger the peace, the real peace in Cyprus, in order to enforce the peace in terms of Greek understanding.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to throw a quick, so maybe a Brexit question to Andrew, if Andrew is there. In a sort of post-Brexit world where we're no longer part of the EU, is there anything that the UK government can do in a sort of positive way to overcome some of the barriers that we've just heard about?
Yes, I think first of all, the fact that the United Kingdom is now no longer a member of the European Union means that we are free to make our own decisions again in a whole range of areas. And one of those areas is foreign policy. We were free before, but we were still tied in to common foreign policy via the EU. But now we are unchained from that, and we can truly get back to making our own decisions again, not only in Britain's interests, but the interests of our friends around the world, whereas previously it was much harder to do. And it's particularly hard to do when it comes to Cyprus whilst we were in the EU, because clearly Cyprus and Greece are members of the EU, and therefore we felt obliged to follow the same policy that they were adopting. We can break free of that now, and I certainly urge our government to look afresh at the issues relating to Cyprus and to think about a different approach going forward. And I say that because I don't believe that's in the United Kingdom's interests to be seen to be on one side only. We have taken the Greek Cypriot side for too long. It's achieved nothing. That now needs to change. We now need to be friends to both communities. But at the same time, we need to protect our own sovereign territories on the island of Cyprus. There are two sovereign base areas, but they are overseas territories legally. So they are British sovereign territory, and we need to look after those and defend them. And I hope that in any future agreement that may be reached over the whole issue of where Cyprus finishes up, which is what we're talking about today, that those two territories, those two bases will not be relinquished. And in fact, I'd like to see those be treated as permanent territories of the UK, and to be treated as equal part of the British family, the same as other overseas territories. I don't think there should be any question of us relinquishing them. I think the Greek Cypriot side will demand this, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Turkish Cypriot side have already made it clear that they support Britain retaining its sovereignty over those territories. So I think that Britain is now in a different position. We can make a different, go in a different direction on this. And of course, there's lots of other things going on at the moment. I don't expect a change of policy overnight, but I think we need a debate within the Conservative Party to change the direction of this so that we can be more balanced and look to a long-term viable solution, which I have to say I think is likely now to be two nations within one island, but whilst respecting the fact that we would retain two distinct territories, Akrotiri and Dhekelia, as permanently territories of the United Kingdom.
Thank you. It is 8 o'clock. We would open it up to the wider audience, but I've got two more quick questions, and I'd like a reasonably fast response. The first is to Professor Işıksal, and the question is really around, we are where we are today, and Northern Cyprus has been in sort of some form of political isolation, international isolation, sporting isolation, and so on for some 60 years. So, even though there may not be absolute political change in the direction you would like to see in the near future, how can we sort of unblock some of these other areas of isolation, even without a political solution?
Thank you, Brooks. First of all, let me...
Using your diplomatic skills.
Yeah, I will do my best. But let me tell you this, we have a new leadership, we have a new understanding, and we won't stay as political prisoners of the Greek Cypriots anymore. We are so determined about this, and we will move forward. How we will move forward is, we are not out of choices. So first of all, we can have a recognition, like in the case of Kosovo. How it could happen, let me very briefly explain. For instance, in the Annan plan, which is rejected by the Greek Cypriots, it given us a new state of affairs. And it says that Turkish Cypriot state. Don't misunderstand, but I'm not obsessed with the Turkish Cypriot of Northern Cyprus. And for me, Turkish Cypriot state sounds even better. So in that case, for example, if we bring this case to Security Council with the new name and new recognition, and let's say that any member of the Security Council, including United Kingdom, let's say, give us as a support, then there will be a political, equilibrium. There will be an opportunity for another state to recognize currency. Secondly, I think we should go for Taiwan model. As we all know that the Turkish Cypriots are under the embargoes, as you mentioned, but what is the meaning of the embargoes? I mean, can anyone explain me what is the objective, what is the purpose, and what is the result of the embargoes? It's inhuman. It's nothing to do with political rights, first of all. It's our human rights to have a free trade, free traveling, sport activities, etc., etc. What is the purpose? The purpose is pushing Turkish Cypriots to accept any solution dictated by the Greek Cypriots. This is the purpose. What is the result? The result is not like this. The only result is Turkish Cypriots are becoming more dependent to Turkey. So is it what international community want to see? This is the question they should ask themselves. And I think step by step, we can break these inhuman embargoes. And finally, as I said, we are not out of choices. And this is nothing to do with my official position. This is my all personal argument. I don't want to let floor for any misunderstanding. But also Hong Kong or Monaco model is on the table. Because as I said, we will go forward. We will finish this inhuman isolation, embargoes in any means, and we are not out of alternatives. And as the last resort, we can think about Hong Kong or Monaco model, where our security is protected by Turkey, and we can use Turkey as in order to get touch with the world and export our products and etc. etc.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So I'm going to my next question is to Lee, but I've got a question also from the audience, from Alp, and I'm going to sort of tie the two questions together. So Alp asks do you envisage a better trading relationship due to Brexit? This is to Lee, and this ties in, I think, with your sort of interest in business. And, could business be brought to the island to help ease the isolation that the people of Northern Cyprus currently feel?
The answer to that is yes. There are a number of businesses that I've dealt with, both in the United Kingdom and beyond the United Kingdom, who would be interested in opening businesses in Northern Cyprus and indeed in southern Cyprus. They would be happy to do that. They would want various guarantees, because I think there is an elephant in the room of people harking back to the past where perhaps businesses were, during more difficult times, were not able to be sustained and they were forced out, basically. So they would want certain guarantees given, but there is golden opportunities for business and golden opportunities, and I think this might be a key to prosperity for everyone on the island of Cyprus, to actually bring this investment in. Obviously, and I take Michael's point, I'm not going to use the word solution. I'm going to use the word a resolution to try and sort things out, whether it be a two-state or not. But to sort that out would enable the businesses to come in, enable the people of Northern Cyprus to prosper, and enable business to be done. And as Andrew said, we are now outside of the European Union. The United Kingdom is back in control of its own destiny. And again, on foreign policy, although we did have our own foreign policy, I think that Andrew is perfectly right. That was, to a certain element, dictated to by what the EU's overriding rule was. So, yeah, I do see great opportunities for business, and I think it's to everyone's benefit.
Good, good. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so this is a question from Osman, which I'm going to pose to Michael. In April 2004, after Turkish Cypriots had voted yes to the Annan Plan, the EU proclaimed its commitment to end the isolation of Turkish Cypriots. In practice, and from a legal perspective, why has this never happened?
Well, it just shows you can't trust anything the EU says. And I'm also rather glad we voted for Brexit. No, it's simply because of the pressure that the Greeks and the Greek Cypriots are able to bring to bear. Unless they change their mind, or somebody persuades them to change their mind, nothing's going to happen.
Okay, Professor Işıksal, given how the votes played out, back in sort of 2004, what from a legal perspective, why has this never happened?
Thank you for this question. One of my PhDs, I have two PhDs, one is about European Union, and I'm sorry to say this, but European Union has many problems. And one of the problems is even smaller state like Cyprus, Republic of Cyprus, can blockade the whole organization political will. So why it happened is that because we are not very alien to double standards regulated by the European Union, and there is a Greece open blackmail to the other member states in terms of blockading the enlargement process. And so when you take all this into account, we see that European Union, unfortunately, is not a fair moderator or fair actor in Cyprus problem. So because of their rules that binding themselves, we can never expect a fair treatment by the European Union, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. Okay, this is a question from Fevzi. The British government's position is to support the reunification of Cyprus. Does the panel feel that any move away from that idea becomes unrealistic? So if the reality out there is, the UN, the US, the UK is saying they want to keep Cyprus as one, is it really being unrealistic to expect anything else to sort of happen? And maybe I'll push this back to Michael.
I think it is unrealistic. The fate of the people of Cyprus is decided in Washington, London, and Brussels, and to some extent Moscow as well. Those are the people who have their hands on the levers of power. They're the people who can make the decisions. Nothing that the people of Cyprus may say or do matters a jot to them. They're concerned only with their own strategic interests. So the big player in this pack, of course, is Turkey. And it depends how Turkey plays its cards vis-a-vis those other players. The people of Cyprus can go on talking until the cows come home, and we can, at least our children or grandchildren, can have a seminar like this in 50 years' time, unless the big powers, or one of them, changes their mind.
So I mean, Andrew, you're a member of Parliament. The Conservative Party are in power today. You have a voice in the party, a strong voice. How are you going to try and fight against the reality on the ground, which is the Foreign Office position, which is to really keep following really the sort of the UN trajectory, and really what the major powers out there want to see, which seems to be currently keeping Cyprus as one state effectively.
I sort of answer by referring to my previous answer, really, that because of Brexit, because of Britain being outside the European Union, we've got to seize this opportunity now to do different things and be different and look at new ideas and to think about Britain's interests and our historical friends and how we rekindle some of those relationships. And I'm an advocate of doing more with the Commonwealth, for instance, far more than we have done in recent years. That's been a neglected relationship. I think we can do more to support Israel, actually, and I think we should look at that as well. I think we should do more to support Taiwan. I think that their situation is perilous, and I think we should do a lot more to give them support and recognition. And I think that in the case of Cyprus, I think we have to be bold and look at new ideas. And those ideas, I'm glad to say, are now being aired on this meeting this evening. But I think within the Conservative Party, there needs to be a debate on this, and there needs to be a refreshed approach. And I think for too long, outdated Foreign Office approaches need to now be challenged. And I think that more people need to talk to ministers, to Dominic Raab and others, to see how our policy towards Cyprus can be renewed. We're in a magnificent position now as a country. We are free to make our own choices again. And, we shouldn't just lazily stick to what's gone on for the last few decades. We now have a chance. I mean, we're going through a dark period at the moment, but when this period's over, we've got a chance to renew our country in so many ways. And in terms of foreign policy, we should be bolder. We should be rekindling relationships that we've neglected. And we should look at issues like Cyprus and others and propose solutions that in the past could not have happened, but I think today could. And I think Britain is in a unique position to be able to do that.
Thank you for that. Well, I mean, Lee Scott, talked about, about sort of beginning to break the logjam by trying to encourage British business to engage more with Northern Cyprus and the business community there. But really, I want to go back to Professor Işıksal. In your fantasy world, I want you to imagine that suddenly Northern Cyprus is independent. You're a standalone country, you're there. A little bit like the sort of arguments that have been drawn out on Scotland. Do you think that an independent TRNC could actually stand on its own 2 feet economically?
Thank you, Brooks. Yes, I honestly believe, because when we look at the sectors in the TRNC, we see that we got some sectors which are really good. One of them is tourism sector, as we know. Also, we can add entertainment sector maybe, and also education sector. Now we have more than 30 universities in the island, and North Cyprus is a very safe place to live. both in terms of pandemic and in terms of general overall security. We have very good lecturers here all around the world. We have students more than 100 countries. So just in my imaginary world, why not we have students from all around the world, not only from 80 countries, but from 173 countries, and plus we have lots of trees everywhere. So, and I also believe that when we break this isolation, we may also have some sectors that could develop, especially software industry, in an island where there's a short distances and where you can establish a strong infrastructure. I think all of these are possible.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, this is sort of quite a narrow question from Erden. Erden asks, after the recent events between Azerbaijan and Armenia, in addition to Turkey's now supporting 2 states in Cyprus, what do you think the likelihood is of Azerbaijan officially recognizing the TRNC? And if they do so, do you think this would have a positive knock-on effect with other nations perhaps recognizing the TRNC?
If I may,
It's a geopolitical question.
If I may, Brooks, I genuinely think that if Azerbaijan did recognise TRNC, then it would have a major impact on a number of other countries around the world. I really do.
Right. And actually, what do you, given your knowledge of Israel, for example, and the sort of almost ambivalent relationship that they've had in recent years with Turkey, do you think, which side of the fence do you think Israel might fall on this?
I think it would be fair to say you could ask me that question after the March elections to see who the Prime Minister and the government is. It's a very, of a moment, as you know only too well, I think this is the 3rd election in the last 2 years. Right. And until that election has been held, it's very difficult to say, depending on who the Prime Minister is, who the coalition partners is informing the government, which is always the case in Israel. So it's a difficult question to answer at this moment. But if you ask me in late March, I may well be able to answer that question a little better.
Okay. I mean, this is always the challenge countries have, is who's going to stick their neck out first in recognizing somebody. And obviously, I think somebody raised earlier the issue of Taiwan. Taiwan for a long time, for certainly 75 years almost, has sort of been out there on its own, with people dealing with it, trading with it, having sporting events with it and so on, but nobody really sticking their neck out to say, I'm going to recognize you as an independent country. The reason for that is because China and the economic power of China has prevented that from happening. So I guess in order to accelerate that happening, the only way that can happen really is, I suppose, is for Turkey to use its leverage, which again, I don't see that happening in the short run, given their other preoccupations at this stage. But I just wondered if either Professor Işıksal or Michael, if you felt there might be a knock-on effect with Azerbaijan finally recognizing the TRNC or not. Okay, I'll go to Michael first.
You have to have a critical mass. I mean, one country recognizing would just be brushed aside. But if you could get 20 or 30, then you've got recognition. One point on Andrew's efforts in the House of Commons. When I was there, I discovered that for every one MP who supported the Turkish Cypriots, you'd have 3 or 4 supporting the Greek Cypriots. So the balance of power within the Parliament and certainly within the Conservative Party, when you think of who some of the big donors are, you're going to have an uphill struggle to change the mind of the Conservative Party in favour of the Turkish Cypriots. And the British government's policy is not run by politicians. It's not run by the Dominic Raabs and the William Hagues of this world. It's run by the mandarins, the civil servants in the Foreign Office, who have always run British foreign policy towards Cyprus. and their sticky hands can be seen on this to this day.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because I'm reading your mind now. And I want Professor Işıksal wanted to respond to this just briefly, though, because we now have over 83 questions to go through in 10 minutes.
Well, first of all, Mr. Stephen just steal my words. I was just exactly going to say the same thing, because if we are expecting one-to-one recognition, it will not work. Like, because of the international pressure, they will withdraw their recognition, as in the case of Bangladesh and Pakistan. But as Stefan very rightly underlined, if there's a 20 countries recognition simultaneously at the same time, then it may have, you know, a big effect, and I don't think they will withdraw their recognition if we reach to something 20. And let me tell you that I will not give you names, but I can say that there are at least 10 countries who are ready to recognize TRNC actually. You know.
Right. Okay. So this is now my question for Andrew. The Commonwealth was mentioned earlier. And do you think it's realistic that perhaps the TRNC could apply to actually join the Commonwealth? And how could this practically happen? I mean, we've seen 3 countries already who were not previously in the Commonwealth join the Commonwealth in the past sort of 20 years. So I'm wondering, could TRNC be the 4th one?
Well, of course, the Commonwealth can only admit nation states. So TRNC, if it were to become a nation state, then of course it could be in the Commonwealth. But Cyprus, I argue that the whole of Cyprus is part of the Commonwealth. The Republic of Cyprus, as created, included the entire island. So whatever has happened in between then, there is at no stage has any part of that island been removed, from what I can recall, from the Commonwealth. So therefore, I've always believed that one way of approaching TRNC is to treat it as if it's already part of the Commonwealth. And I think that that is what I've always tried to do. When I've spoken at events to talk about TRNC, I've spoken about TRNC as a part of the Commonwealth already. So I don't think it should be a question of it applying to join. It is already there. And I think the Commonwealth could have played and could still play a role in helping to resolve this whole issue. But without going back on some of the things, because I know we are running out of time, there are in fact a number of countries that do recognize Taiwan, believe it or not. There are about 7 or 8 countries, mostly Caribbean and Central America, but have actually recognized Taiwan. It's not impossible, but I think that to resolve the TRNC question, if the hope of any kind of coming together is now that moment has gone, then really there has to be, the only way it will change is if a country like Britain or America or some other country decides, and it can't just be Azerbaijan, because clearly, you know, that would be seen as inevitable anyway. You need a country like us or another country to come forward and say, look, we need a deadline on this. Either there's a solution, you come together, you form a federation. If it's not resolved by a certain date, then there's only one long-term. It cannot go on that these people are isolated and treated as second-class citizens forever and ever and ever. This cannot go on for another 50 years. So I think there needs to be a deadline, unless there can be a solution that is amicable and one that both sides can reach by consensus. If that can't happen, and I don't really hold out much hope now that it can, then I think we need to set a deadline. And after that deadline, I think we simply have to recognize a new state. But I hope we can do so in a way whereby both sides can work together as good neighbors. And that is really what we must work towards now.
Okay, we basically have 5 more minutes. I'm going to ask everybody to sort of wrap up. I'm going to ask Professor Işıksal to start off, but I'm going to give him a leading question with which I want him to answer during his wrap up, which is a question from somebody in the audience who says, Britain's legacy as an ex-colonial power has been the cause of much controversial discussion, especially last year. What responsibility does the UK have to the people of Northern Cyprus. And maybe as everybody else wraps up, they could integrate that, answering that question as well in their summaries. And you've all got about 60 seconds now to wrap up.
Well, I will just try to answer this question. First of all, as a former colonial power, United Kingdom should be much more fair to both sides of the island. I believe that, first of all, a protocol may be added to the United Kingdom Turkey free trade agreements for Turkish Cypriots for them to benefit. So Trnc products may be sold to the United Kingdom through Turkey with the certificate of origin of Turkey, or alternatively, United Kingdom can make separate arrangements for the Trnc products, similar to direct trade regulation of the European Union. And in this scenario, Trnc products could be sold via international recognized port of Famagusta, and the certificate of origin could be North Cyprus. So my whole point is that we are expecting much more fair approach from the United Kingdom to the both sides of the island, because let me remind you that there are more than 300,000 Turkish Cypriots living in United Kingdom, maybe even more, and we are really expecting a fair stance from the British. Thank you.
Okay, Lee, over to you to wrap up. 45 seconds.
45 seconds, right. I say again, the people who should be making the decisions are the people of Northern Cyprus and Southern Cyprus. It should be their decision. This is the chance for a reset for the United Kingdom as we've left the European Union. And let us just hope that in peace and harmony, things can be taken forward for the benefit of everyone on the island of Cyprus.
Thank you for that. Andrew, can you wrap up?
Well, we have a duty here. This is not something we can walk away from. Cyprus was a British colony, and the links between Cyprus and the UK are still incredibly strong. So we have an historical duty to the people of Cyprus to find a way forward on this. I can only reiterate what I said a few moments ago, that we are at a stage, a crucial stage now, whereby either an agreement should be made with both sides to go along with it and by consensus. And if that cannot be achieved, and the chances of it being achieved are now dwindling as we speak, I feel that there has to be a date set whereby we recognize the fact that there is no alternative but to have two separate nation states within one island, but hopefully ones that will get on well, be good neighbors, and share peacefully that territory. And in the meantime, to work together to resolve all the outstanding issues so that when that eventually happens, there can be harmony rather than constant conflict and disputes. That has to be the only solution unless both sides can, in the coming few years, find a workable arrangement whereby they can stay as one nation state. But it is, as Lee said, completely down to the two sides and the very people of that island to make that choice. It's not for us. But Britain must stand by Cyprus. We have a duty to see it through and hopefully resolve this on a permanent basis. It cannot go on for another 50 years. This is a chance to reset things and to look at solutions that will end this matter once and for all.
Thank you for that. And finally, over to you, Michael.
Britain entered into a solemn treaty of guarantee in 1960, and we've broken it 3 times. We didn't prevent the genocide. We recognized the Greek Cypriots as the government of the whole island, which they're not, and we failed to prevent the Greek Cypriots getting into the European Union. Place not your faith in the British government. As far as the future is concerned, I would like to see the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots living happily in that island, but it will have to be in 2 separate houses. There is no way, in my mind, that we can force them back into the same house. They've had a bloody divorce and they don't want another one.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'd like to thank our panelists for a lively discussion. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Professor Işıksal. And thank you, Michael. And I want to thank the wider audience there for their questions, of which there are now 91 questions, of which I think we probably only answered 3 or 4 or 5 of those 91, now 92 questions. But to remind you all, we have 2 more webinars coming up on the 24th of February and the 24th of March. So if you have enjoyed this evening, I would highly encourage you to sign up for the next 2 webinars. Thank you all for joining us and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooks.